Greetings. My name is Nuta Adinike Aminra-Il. I am the director of Ankh Academy. It's a green STEAM homeschool African-centered cooperative of resources, online, virtual education. So I share information and I create curriculum and guidebooks, games, activities, visuals. I'm a reading specialist. My background in education was Cross-Cat special education, and Cross-Cat incorporated from autism, mild to moderate, mental, cognitive disability, learning disability, behavioral challenges, as well as gifted and talented. So I served in the local school district for 15 years and retired, or resigned actually, to create a homeschool network where we are feeding our children the food that we grow ourselves. We're recreating a community. I realize that we don't have a community. We have a neighborhood that has been invaded with GMO and invader businesses, as I call them. Businesses that don't serve our community. They don't give back to our community. They set up shop. They set up missionaries, so to speak, to engage our people. And so we end up with a handmade basket, and they end up with a grant and funding to build their empire. They open up their stores, we go in, we buy, they treat us with disrespect. They take the money we give them and take it back to their community. They don't even live here. It's like a drug dealer. They usually don't live in the community that they exploit. They go back to another area and they pay for their relaxation and their leisure. They go to their hotels and their resorts and other kinds of experiences off the money that we give to these nefarious activities. So I saw that my children were eating GMO foods. They were on drugs. Parents weren't available, oftentimes because they were working double jobs and 2 or 3 jobs sometimes, or had a business, and they are not making enough income and so they're doing the best they can to support their families. So I found that I had a parent that asked me if I opened up a homeschool, she would send her child. But once I found out or connected with her, I had found that she had moved her child, and she had to move. And most of our African American families are transients. And I came to Kansas City through my father. He was in the Air Force. We settled in close to Richard Scobower Air Force Base when it was active. And then when it shut down, we remained. I basically graduated from high school here and then went to college. And when I returned back to Missouri or Kansas City area, I I got my real estate license and tried to sell and work in property. And then I moved into a house. I started my own garden. I started making handmade items and opened up as a vendor and enjoyed myself and took care of my children in that way. So I've returned to that as a retired teacher, but opening up this homeschool network and teaching others industrial arts, science, technology, engineering, industrial arts, and mathematics is my STEAM initiative. So opening up a homeschool network, providing resources, came under my ministry of sorts. I had started studying Kemetic spirituality and decided to become a Kemetic priestess under the auspices of my high priest, Saste Mater. And then he taught me the basic sciences and understanding through the Ascent Society. He served as a minister for over 30 years. But I have a special treat today. I have been meditating on the objective of nation building, of galvanizing a way for our community, and I have tried to outreach to many individuals. I have friends and connections and associates all over the country and all over the world. And I had recently attended the National Black United Front 38th year conference on this past Friday. And it was very informative. I found some wonderful individuals who are out in the community and galvanizing and working for the benefit of our sons and daughters, our families, and bridging the tyranny, essentially, and terrorism that we have to face in the U.S. society. But I was inspired when I came home and went online, and one of my favorite, foremost herus is Dr. Amos Wilson. The man is brilliant, and I often listen to a lot of his YouTube videos because he is so inspiring. His passion for our people has always been powerful. So I went online and I ordered his book. I had just enough money, and I put aside that money until I got it together, and I finally was able to order a book. And so today I'd like to introduce the book that I just got in the mail. So Friday I got it. This week I received it, and I'm really excited. This book is the Opus of Dr. Amos Wilson. And so we're going to open this book up. I'm really excited. So this is our book opening. So I'm really looking forward to, and I'm hoping that you're going to be excited about it. Okay, let me get into here. Alrighty. Alright, so it's another box. Here's the container it came in, and now here's another box. Let me see here. Oh, this is really exciting. Oh, let's see. Oh, let me get the scissors here. Okay, and here's the book. Oh. Okay, I don't want to tear everything up. I'm just trying to get it out as expediently as possible. Okay, alrighty, and here's the top, the invoice for the order. Blueprint for Black Power. Blueprint for Black Power, Dr. Amos N. Wilson. A moral, political, economic imperative for the 21st century. Issues of manhood in black and white. I'm going to read the back of the book. African Studies, Economics, Political Government, Psychology is the category. And he says here, African life into the coming millennia is imperiled by white and Asian power. But I choose to use Caucasian. True power must nest in the ownership of the real estate wherever African people dwell. Economic destiny determines biological destiny. Blueprint for Black Power details a master plan for the power revolution necessary for Black survival in the 21st century. White treatment of African Americans, despite a myriad of theories explaining Caucasian behavior, ultimately rests on the fact that they can. They possess the power to do so. Such a power differential must be neutralized if blacks are to prosper in the 21st century. African Americans earn a take-home salary of nearly 500 billion with a B yearly, not to mention the trillions that they generate. They retain only 5% of this income. Viewed as a nation, their economy would be the 8th or 9th largest in the world. African Americans possess enormous potential to amass effectual social, political, and economic power, and thus control their destiny and secure their liberation. Professor Wilson argues that we're the African American community to see itself as indeed a de facto nation. Then its scourges of poverty, disemployment, crime, miseducation, wanted consumerism, alienated deficit spending, misleadership, and powerlessness would be drastically reduced, if not eliminated. Blueprint posts that an African American, Caribbean, Pan-African bloc would be most potent for the generation and delivery of Black power in the United States and the world to counter white and Asian power networks. Wilson frames this imperative by deconstructing the U.S. elite power structure of government, political parties, think tanks, corporations, foundations, media, lobbyists, interest groups, banking, and foreign investment particulars, potentially strong Black institutions as the church, media, and think tanks, industry collectives, such as investment clubs and credit unions, rotating credit associations such as African originated Isuzu, the Tontine and Partner are analyzed. Pan-Africanism, Black nationalism, ethnocentrism, reparations are assessed, often misused and underused financial institutions as securities, mutual funds, stocks, underwriting, and incubators. Advocated thus elucidating oft-neglected opportunities for economic empowerment. Blueprint delineates white power and routinely critiques the historic moralizing of Black socioeconomic conditions and programmatic ineptitude. Wilson warns the consequences of Black obsolescence, biological annihilation. Aptly titled, Blueprint for Black Power stops not at critique, but prescribes radical, practical theories, frameworks, and approaches for true power. It gives a biting look into Black potentiality. This 900-page treaty is a journey into the protracted. This is excellent. And so now I'm going to open it up and read. Ooh. This was copywritten in 1998 by African World Info Systems, first edition. The 8th printing is 2017. All rights reserved. No part of this particular may be reproduced. Okay. Blueprint for Black Power, a moral, political, economic imperative for the 21st century. Other books by Amos and Wilson: Issues of Manhood in Black and White, an incisive look into masculinity and the socio definition of African man, the development of psychology of the Black child, Black on Black violence, the psychodynamic of Black self-annihilation in service of white domination, awakening the natural genius of Black children, the falsification of African consciousness, the Eurocentric history, psychiatry, and politics of white supremacy, African-centered consciousness versus New World Order, Garveyism, and the age of globalism, the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat, working title. So, Professor Amos N. Wilson is a former social caseworker, supervising probation officer, psychological counselor, training administrator in New York City Department of Juvenile Justice, and assistant professor of psychology at the City University of New York. Born in Hattiesburg, Mississippi in 1941, Amos Wilson completed his undergraduate degree at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. He later migrated to New York, where he mastered at Fordham University and New School for Social Research before attending his doctorate from Fordham University, Bronx, New York, in the field of general theoretical psychology. Dr. Wilson taught courses in general development, adolescence, abnormal social, personality, and cognitive psychology, thinking and writing skills development, provided personal and academic counsel, researched and designed youth and adult rehabilitation programs, etc. Familiarity. Brother Amos availed for appearances on radio and TV at universities, educational, cultural, and political organizations. The First World Alliance, the African Poetry Theater, African Echoes, House of Our Lord Church, the Patrice Lumumba Coalition, the Slave Theater, to name just a few. His travels took him through the United States to Canada, the Caribbean, and Dr. Wilson's activities transcended academia into the field of business, owning and operating various enterprises in the greater New York area. Colleges and colleagues, lay and professional, recently acclaimed him the ultimate Garveyite. A prolific writer, Wilson has penned other pertinent works in the area of education, child development, and therapeutic psychology, which he hopes to share with readers and admirers in the near future. So then it moves to his dedication. And so he goes into his acknowledgments, and now we have the table of contents. I'm going to just read the outline of the table of contents. So it goes with Chapter 1, What is Power? Chapter 2, Basis of Power, Organization, and Ethnic Resources. Okay. Chapter 3, Social and Cultural Origins of Power. Chapter 4, consciousness and power. Chapter 5, self-concept and power. Chapter 6, power and personality. Chapter 7, class, race, and power in America. Chapter 8, the power process of the ruling class. Chapter 9, policy formation process. Chapter 10, the candidate selection process. Chapter 11, ideology and legitimization of dominance. Chapter 12, the economic order and power. Chapter 13, the financial corporate elite, the New World government. Chapter 14, race and economics. Chapter 15, Africa agnosticies. Chapter 16, investing in and trading with African nations. Chapter 17, empowerment through wealth. Chapter 18, benevolent fronts, assault local and global African markets. Chapter 19, the paucity of black wealth. Chapter 20, myth of the market economy and black power. Chapter 21, nation within a nation. Chapter 22, demographic foundations of an African American nation within a nation. Chapter 23, the Black Church, key to Black economic empowerment, and he has a question mark. Chapter 24, the Black consumer and the economics of Afrocentrism. Chapter 25, the relationship of white-owned banks to the Black community. Chapter 26, Black-owned banks, curators of wealth. Chapter 27, financing Black economic development. Chapter 28, rotating credit associations, prime importance of saving. Chapter 29, investment clubs. Chapter 30, franchises, cooperatives, corporations, and collective capitalism. Chapter 31, a crisis of leadership. And that closes out. Then he has a bibliography and index. So usually when I, as a reading specialist, I would teach my children to taste the book first, to look at the book, survey it. We always read everything because it's there for a reason. And so even the acknowledgments will tell you his relationships and connections and the history. I mean, you can just take the names that he has. Osei Tutu, Yero Bandele, Marintha Grant, Ralph King, Franklin Joseph, Ivor Alenie, Lorenzo Tyson, and Kweku Oronde. The list goes on as far as his acknowledgments. And each person represents a history and a relationship that goes across the country. The Sankofa Plata, for the many moments missed in your flowering. So we've gone through. There's also a table of illustrations. So he has charts and photographs included, tables of boxes, and where he's been very descriptive, and also put learning in your heart that you may escape the drudgery of hard labor. Become a man of reputation. For who can recall the name of the boy who was lazy in school? Now he is loaded down like an ass, like a beast who carries for his master the one who knows what he really is worth. Set your heart on learning that you may direct the work of the world. You can outdistance that which is running after you, but not what is running inside of you. And he who travels alone travels fastest. He who travels with others travels farthest. And then I think these are proverbs, African proverbs, because I've heard this one. A person does not begin to forge a gun when the war has already arrived in the village. So preparation is another proverb. So then he goes into his foreword. And there are, let me see, he talks about a lot of things, and this is profound. He also has the editor's note. And so then it goes into what is power. So I am so excited to get into this. It's amazing. And I'm really glad to finally get this book. It's been a long time coming. Oh, I'm sorry. Before the contents and after the acknowledgments, or actually before the acknowledgments and between the acknowledgments and the content, let me say it this way, there is a section that's called Instilled. I'm going to go ahead and read that. We have come from our people who think that slavery was back then and has nothing to do with them. Isn't that the truth? There are so many people who think this way. We have never escaped slavery. We share the slave consciousness of our great-great-grandparents. You say slavery has nothing to do with you, and slavery was back then. There? I ask you then, what language do you speak? When did you learn that language? Was that the language African people were speaking when taken into slavery? In the Caribbean and the Americas? The language we speak at this moment is the slave language. The language that our slave ancestors were forced to learn. We still speak it, and you can still hear the pidgin, the Creole, and the other carryovers of our language right at this moment. The experience they had to go through. That language, with its words defined by history and by an experience, is the language we use to guide our behavior. It's the language we use today to talk to ourselves. It's the language we use today to learn about ourselves and to learn about the world. It's the language we use today to understand ourselves. Is there any wonder that we are still confused? What kind of food do you eat? You say soul food? Was that the food of African people? Slave food, the food that we find most satisfying. The food that we find that sticks to our ribs. The food we call down home. The food we learn to eat in the slave quarters. Yet we dare say we have escaped slavery? How can you say that you exist in another consciousness from those people? What kind of clothes are we wearing? Were these the clothes of African people? What names or what kind of names do we respond to? Tamika and all these other names we have gotten going on out there. Okay, he makes that's a little jab. What kind of names do we identify with? Why is it that African names sound strange to us? And yet we dare say we have a different consciousness from our slave great-grandparents. We are still of the same consciousness. We are still in the same position. Still servants. Our reason for being in America is to serve Caucasians and to generate wealth for them. Ultimately, I ask the question that's closest to home. What kind of God do you worship? What's the name of it? Who taught you to praise him? Was this the God you were praying to before you were brought to these shores? Is this the religion you had before you were brought to these shores? Can you name one African God? How can you then define yourself, the very essence of yourself, the very essence of your soul, and organize the very nature of your life here on earth based on a God handed to us by a slave master, and then claim that you have no slave consciousness and are not related to slavery? In other words, we are not Africans. We are possessed. Amos Wilson, 1994. And so he talks about the concept of falsified consciousness, which is a culmination of post-traumatic stress, cognitive dissonance, denial, which when you lie to yourself, you go crazy because you're trapped. So this is a condensed excerpt from a talk titled Instruments of Power, Cited in African-Centered Consciousness versus the New World Order, page 95-97, delivered at the United States Movement in Brooklyn, New York. This is his opus. This is his masterpiece. Blueprint for Black Power. Dr. Amos N. Wilson. And I will be reading it and sharing excerpts from it as I go along. This is not just a book, it's a manual, it's a guide, and I would like to encourage anyone who wants to read along with me and share and communicate back and forth to please contact us. You're more than welcome. amin.ankh@live.com is my email, and I hope I don't get in trouble with that because I'm not trying to get a lot of junk mail, but my business and my information is on the site, and it is free for anyone who understands African American consciousness. This is directed, and I speak to my blood brothers and sisters, my queens, our youth, our mothers. I speak to the womb. I speak to our eggs and our wombs, our future. We have to organize. We have to forgive one another as melanated people. We have to come together. We have to lay aside our differences and be able to stand together to support one another. And so the ideas of putting resources and people and minds around us to create our structure, and to be able to say unapologetically that I want to do something for myself, for my immediate family and loved ones, and those who love me, those who want to live with me, those who want to exist in a future world where we can practice our way of life, speak our language. And Najarek Netaru Anukdak Net Iti Hetep Ankujas Nepti Wajat Iti Aku Iti Sheps Iti Peret Iti Anu Ankujas Nepti Wajat. There's nothing like being able to speak your language, to use your tongue and your mouth and your anatomy in the way that it was, the utterances naturally flow. That you're not contorting yourself, you're not twisting your tongue to enunciate someone else's language, which is really oppressive, which is really a derivation of our own languages. We are the first aboriginals. We are the indigenous. We are the indigo. That is why I say indigo. Indigo is a sacred color of purple. That indigo plant used to be worn by royalty, exclusively royalty. No one else could wear it. And this sacred indigo plant also represents the higher crown chakras of our energy, of our kundalini. And now we wear denim jeans. And denim jeans used to be created in America for imprisoners, of people who are imprisoners, people who worked on the railroads. And the cotton was our plant that came from Africa. And we're picking cotton and dyeing it in the indigo. That's our color. That's the color of royalty. That's the color of high priesthood. And indigo represents the indigenous, the original people of all lands, because we were the first on the planet. We were the first to populate the planet. So when the Asians crossed the Bering Straits, they met us. We are the Olmec. We are the Mayans. We are the first Buddha in China had coiled hair. He was an indigo. The first Krishna used to be indigo blue. And then they changed him over time with the European invasion to this pastel color that you see. Because they were afraid that if the color was printed in black and white, that he would be too dark. They wanted to have that light, Caucasian, Aryan complexion. Everything has changed, but this is not the way things have always been. And we have to acknowledge that. We are the gold. We're the golden children. We're the people of the sun. And it's time for us to come together, to unite on the conscious level. Thank you for listening to me. And again, I will be sharing a little bit more as time goes on. So I offer you peace. I offer you health and prosperity. Ankh. Hetepu is peace. Ankh is life. Seneb is health. Wajet is strength. Uja is prosperity. Dua'u